The desert wind drifted slow across the high plains, carrying the scent of mesquite, wood, and the fading warmth of the dying sun as the young bride, Elena Whitford, stood at the edge of the Apache camp with her hands clasped tightly in front of her, trying to quiet the trembling in her chest. She had come here willingly, though everyone in her town believed she'd been forced, because the truth was something far more complicated, something that lived in the space between fear and fate. Before her stood Coda, the Apache leader whose reputation stretched across territories like wildfire. Fierce protector, calm strategist, a man whose power lived not in volume but in presence. His voice, deep and almost soothing, cut through the desert silence as he stepped closer, stopping only when the distance between them felt charged like the air before lightning. "Tell me when to stop," he murmured, not as a warning, but as a promise, an oath that nothing he did would ever cross the boundaries she held. Elena swallowed hard, not from fear, but from the strange familiarity she felt in his nearness, as if every story she'd been told about the world outside, her quiet upbringing, had finally stepped into the firelight. Her heart thudded as she whispered, "I won't," and the words surprised even her, carrying a softness that felt as dangerous as it was honest. Coda's eyes flickered, not with triumph but with something deeper, a kind of reverence that made the moment heavier than the mountains surrounding them. He reached out slowly as though approaching a wild creature, his hand stopping inches from her arm, giving her every chance to change her mind. But Elena didn't move. She couldn't. Their worlds, one shaped by whispered expectations, the other molded by survival and honor, collided quietly in the small circle of firelight between them. The flames cracked, sending sparks upward like scattered stars as the night settled around them. And Coda finally spoke again, his voice quiet but certain. "You crossed into my land without fear." "Why?" Elena inhaled shakily, gathering the courage she thought she'd lost long before this moment. "Because I heard your people took my father," she said. "But I also heard something else. That you're a man who listens before he draws his knife." A slow breath left Coda. Not quite a sigh, not quite relief. "You walked into danger for truth," he said. "That makes you brave." She shook her head. "Desperate," she corrected softly. But Coda gave a small, almost hidden smile. "To my people, those two walked together." As the moon climbed higher, their conversation deepened. About loss, about misunderstanding, about two worlds that had built walls so thick neither side remembered who put the first stone down. Elena learned that her father wasn't a prisoner but a welcomed guest, recovering after a fall during a storm. In her camp, every step taken with the patience of a man who knew that trust was a slow-growing thing. When she finally saw her father asleep and unharmed inside the healing tent, tears filled her eyes, not of fear but of release. And when she turned to Coda, he didn't speak, didn't claim victory, didn't gloat. Instead, he bowed his head slightly, as if acknowledging the weight of everything she had endured to get here. In that single moment, something shifted between them, something not spoken, not touched but undeniably real. The desert, vast and quiet, waited around them, but inside the circle of their shared breath, Elena realized that the path she'd taken to find truth might lead her somewhere she never intended to go, somewhere she was no longer afraid of. The dawn that followed was soft, painting the horizon in strokes of pale rose and gold, but Elena woke long before the first light touched the canvas of the sky, her heart already tangled in the consequences of the night before. Her father rested peacefully, watched over by an Apache healer, whose calm presence reassured her more than any doctor hired by the town ever had. Yet Elena's thoughts were not on her father. They drifted relentlessly to Coda, the stoic leader who spoke little but revealed more in silence than most men did in full conversation. When she stepped outside the tent, she found him already awake, standing with arms crossed as he studied the sunrise like it was a battlefield map. He didn't turn as she approached, but he sensed her just the same. "You didn't sleep," he said, not asking, merely knowing. She shook her head, letting out a breath that felt heavier than she expected. "No one told me the world outside my town could feel different," she admitted. "I thought all of this was danger, but it feels more like clarity." Coda finally faced her fully, the early light catching in his eyes with a warmth she hadn't noticed before. "Most people fear what they do not try to understand," he said. "But you walked in alone. That speaks louder than any Words. She tried to smile. But something inside her tightened as villagers from her town suddenly appeared on the ridge, carrying rifles in righteous anger. Fear surged through her, not for herself, but for the man standing before her, for the people she'd met, for the culture she'd glimpsed in the quiet moments by the fire. Koda's warriors formed a defensive line, though he lifted a hand to keep them steady. Elena knew what had to be done. She stepped forward, planting herself between both sides as her voice rang out across the clearing, fierce and unexpected. "Stop, all of you," she explained, loud, trembling, and unashamed. The truth of what happened, how her father had been helped, not harmed, how lies had been used to fuel hatred, how the Apache had shown her honor when her own people had shown her fear. The tension crackled like dry kindling until Koda stepped behind her, his presence solid and unwavering, declaring, "We do